It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstein Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media business industrial complex in all its World Series glory. How you doing today, Champion Steve?
I'm doing much better, than I was a couple weeks ago. My Dodgers won the World Series. I'm not a champion. I do not claim to be that. That was Chris putting words in my mouth.
You didn't hit a grand slam?
I did not hit a grand slam. I'm not Freddie Freeman. Yeah, let me tell you something. I mean, that I don't know if it's just maybe because I'm a Dodger fan, but that's got to be one of the most, in my view, one of the most iconic moments of World Series history. A walk-off grand slam in game one. I mean, I don't think it's as much as the Kirk Gibson play, because Gibson was hurt. Nobody even knew he was going to be in the game. He didn't play again. That was the only thing he did in the entire World Series. That was maybe slightly more iconic, but that's got to be one of the all-time great World Series memories, I would think.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I saw the Kirk Gibson. Did you see? I assumed you saw that live.
I saw that live. Yeah, I saw it live.
No, it packed a punch for sure. I think I even mentioned this when we were kind of dogging on Derek Jeter in the last show. And this was earlier than the World Series. I think it might have been, maybe it was a National League Championship Series, but he called out Freddie Freeman for not, real champions play on bum ankles. I tell you, man, if whatever Mount Olympus these kind of jinxes go through, but then get sent back to Earth. I even thought at the time, I was like, that's just really dumb. And then he has been on a tear. And even, in fact, Derek Jeter even kind of continued to barb with him, from the commentator's box. And it's just like, dude, what are you doing?
Because Freeman played really well in the NLCS.
He hasn't played bad the entire playoffs.
No.
On one leg.
Yeah, I mean, because it didn't look like it at times, but he had a bad ankle. He could barely run.
Yeah.
But I mean, the guy, I mean, he hit 4 home runs in 4 games in a row, and then he had RBIs in game 5. I mean,
yeah. No, that's Mr. October type stuff right there.
Derek Jeter is it's amazing the contrast between Derek Jeter, the player, and Derek Jeter, the commenter. What happened?
He's such a drip. Such a drip. But no, that was a fantastic World Series. And you got to feel, I mean, the COVID one has got a giant asterisk. So it
does, even in my mind, that's an asterisk, because they only played 40 whatever games or whatever.
Yeah. So this kind of, almost, in fact, winning this one makes that one even a little bit better in a way.
Kind of, and then listen, the Dodger fans have been waiting decades, literally, to have this happen. For as much money as they've spent and all of that. And I mean, there was a time that the team was homegrown, but certainly not anymore. They bought a bunch of players, but they've gone decades where they've underperformed in conjunction with kind of their marketplace and status as a franchise. So this was really kind of a crowning moment. For me, the only thing that would have been better is if Clayton Kershaw had been healthy and pitched. Because Clayton Kershaw might be of everybody, he might be the most iconic Dodger in team history. Maybe not Jackie Robinson, but this side of Jackie Robinson, I'm hard pressed to find someone more iconic than him. But he needed kind of more of a World Series moment, I think.
Yeah, probably that's true. And all in the midst of Villanueva's passing, so that was actually added a little.
Valenzuela, not
Valenzuela. Yeah. Sorry, Valenzuela. Passing in the middle of all of it kind of added like a little bit of like weird stardust to it.
I mean, Fernando along with Steve Garvey were my 2 earliest baseball heroes. And I remember watching Fernando throw that screwball. It's like, what is this pitch? I mean, not that I knew how to throw anything back then, but he was really iconic. And if people don't realize this, he pitched into like his 40s in the Mexican League. So he went on and on a long time past. And then he was the Dodgers Spanish radio announcer too. So he's been around baseball a really long time.
Yeah, I almost was like, when I saw that, I was like, they're definitely winning it, especially against the Yankees, considering that's kind of what he made his name.
Can't lose when on the Fernando week.
Yes, And even his no hitter kind of came later in his career.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. Yeah. So rest in peace, Fernando. And I saw they had his family out there for game one and everything.
That's
classy. That was cool. Yeah.
So yay Dodgers, but really, actually, this is a transition. To show you how much interest there was in this World Series, I think my wife actually watched the last 3 or 4 games with me. And she's just roots for New York by default. That's the level of the engagement. Oh, New York, I'll root for them. But I did tell her how much money Ohtani makes. And then she was vehemently rooting against him the whole time.
Well, maybe she cursed him because Ohtani was like 2 for 16 or something in that series. He was terrible.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Judge, he would have gotten talked about more.
Oh, I know. Yeah, because he did not live up to billing in the World Series at all, and not really in the NLCS either. Particularly, he didn't play well in the postseason. And granted, he had a shoulder injury there at the end of the World Series, but still.
Yeah, every strike. See. You're not worth $700 million. I'm like, okay.
It's not that bad.
So that was kind of funny, but it does speak to there were more eyeballs on this World Series than there has been technically for 7 years. But baseball has, and we've talked about this. We talked about this the last couple of shows, but the trend lines are already good, right? So this isn't completely, the health of baseball is doing pretty good. And this kind of World Series is kind of a cherry on top, but quite a cherry in terms of the eyeballs that were watching and paying attention to this. And not for all the obvious reasons, marquee teams, giant media markets, etc.
History,
massive stars, history. Yes. All those things, there was a bit of a perfect storm here, but the compare and contrast to last season, which is obvious, we don't have to go through the obvious reasons why, but if you dive into the numbers, it is stark how much more people were engaged this year.
Well, yeah, of course. Okay. We found a column in Forbes that is called New York Yankees-L.A. Dodgers World Series was the most watched in 7 years by Brian Adgate, November 1st, 2024. And so this series averaged 15.8 million viewers across all Fox platforms, which was 74% higher than last year's. And last year's was the Rangers, and who was it?
Last year, the Rangers. Oh, geez, Louise, who was it?
Somebody really nondescript. Chris is going to look that up because now
that tells you everything you need to know.
I got it. Here it is. It's Arizona Rangers and
Diamondbacks.
Yeah, that series was the least, and we talked about this at the time. Last year was the least watched to date, averaging 9.08 million viewers, and so that's 74% more this year with Yankees Dodgers. And granted, Yankees and Dodgers are the two most iconic teams in baseball, and they haven't played each other in the World Series since 1981. It's a long, long time coming, but I think you said it right. It's a perfect storm. Even the storylines, it's Judge versus the $700 million man and Ohtani. There's those kind of storylines. By the way, on a non-business you were right about Soto. Goodness. But anyway, so game one averaged 15.2 million, and then game two dipped down to 13.4 million. Game three was at 13.6 million. Game four was at 16.3 million. And then game five, which was not competing against Monday Night Football, was 18.6 million viewers. Now that's, for context, that's like double what like a standard NFL major Sunday match would get. That's not near Super Bowl ratings, but that is dramatically more than regular NFL games.
And we were looking at another article too that did, it doesn't really, it kind of is a, draw in terms of like maybe who won the night when they went up against primetime NFL football. And it's like, it was a lot of parsing of numbers, like, whoa, we add in, the Spanish language broadcast, blah, blah, blah. So, and it basically was a bit of a wash. But if you're even if a World Series game is even in the breathing room of just your average primetime NFL game, that's winning for Major League Baseball. That's tie goes to baseball.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because The ratings have never been comparable for a variety of reasons. We've talked about it before. But the idea that it competed at all is like you said, he went for baseball. Now, we talked about this a little bit last week, but is baseball going to be smart enough to just say, look, it was Yankees Dodgers, walk off, grand slam, all that stuff? Or are they going to tout the benefits of, the 10 minutes shaved off the game via the pitching rule, or something? I mean, I surely they can't make that argument. This was obviously so it's obviously a confluence of circumstances. So the question would be next year when it's not the Yankees Dodgers, it's two quote average teams in terms of profile. Is this going to continue? I suspect probably not. I suspect this is probably the high water mark.
Yeah, and with any of these things, kind of, I think the last point I made similarly was on the Caitlin Clark effect. It's not necessarily what the high water mark is; it's where the new average recedes.
That's what's important.
Yes. So if they keep some of those chunks of those gains, then that's success over time. And because you're going to get Diamondbacks, Texans again, right? That's just the nature of the sport, and you want that, by the way. Like, that's a good thing ultimately for the health of the sport. That people can compete, teams can compete. But so does this put enough new fans in? I mean, here's the one thing that really I think was in it, buried in this story in Forbes, but and I'll read it just so everyone kind of gets the gist. Another positive takeaway for Major League Baseball has been the heightened interest by younger age groups in the U.S. While total viewing has been on the upswing for World Series, for the 18 to 34 age group, the average audience nearly doubled at plus 93% from last year's Fall Classic. The growth was the highest of any demographic. That's massive. I mean, those are the kind of things that, when you dig into the numbers, I would guess that those kind of numbers have Major League Baseball as excited as anything else.
Well, yeah, that's what they want. And because those people don't have the history of all these teams. They don't remember Reggie Jackson in 1981. They don't remember Kirk Gibson in 1988.
Fernando Mania.
Some of them barely even remember, the Yankees of the early 2000s. That were so great. I'm saying if you're 20, you may have been alive, but not really even, remember like Derek Jeter and A-Rod to any great extent. And so, I think that's great. And the other thing, I had that paragraph highlighted too, but the other thing is in here is that they note right above that, they note that the ratings in Japan were just through the stratosphere. Surpassing American ratings, 21 million viewers in Japan,
while competing with work and school.
Yes, because the time it's what 12, 13 hours time.
Yeah, so basically those games are starting at 9, 10 in the morning over there.
Yes, you're exactly right. And they the broadcast had like shots of like Japanese bars and stuff like that. And it's because they're Shohei Ohtani crazy. I don't think, because Yamamoto, the Dodgers pitcher, is Japanese too, but this is an Ohtani effect.
Oh, yeah.
And so that is not going to hold in the future when the next time if the Dodgers aren't in the World Series again, for sure. But I think it's nothing but positive from baseball. They just need to be realistic about where they are, because I think you just said it best. It's what is the mean? It's not the peak or the valley. Last year was a valley. This is definitely the peak. There are not two more iconic teams than the Yankees and Dodgers. So when we recede to like, the Cubs and the Cardinals, say, to make teams up, good teams but not invisible teams, what do we regress to? That's what are they making progress? Because their whole baseball has complained for years that they cannot attract a younger viewer, yet younger viewers up. What was it? 90%, 93%?
Plus 93% from last World Series.
And I have to think that's not just a good sign, but I don't think that has something to do with Yankees Dodgers, but it's not everything.
Yeah, not everything. And the only World Series matchup that would even be comparable would probably be Cubs Red Sox. That would still be a that still wouldn't be the same. No. So I think there's a a young star factor too here. Baseball has kind of retooled the last couple of years. It has like a new generation of younger stars, and so I think have a bunch of them in this game, a bunch of them throughout the playoffs.
Freddie Freeman made a name for himself. Yeah,
totally. So you as a platform for some of these younger, newer stars or star making. I think that's going to go a long way. And like I said, these have been a couple, the kind of drip of baseball's metrics going up. So it also is a bit of a crescendo there. So it's not also just a peak where, this is a total anomaly, because a lot of the ways that they track this are going up. I actually was listening to John Orand, and I think now at Puck News, and he has a new podcast. It's all right. It's not great. But he always has interesting insights.
It's not as good as our podcast.
Oh, never. But he did say that actually the death of the RSNs, which has been a thing that the regional sports networks, obviously was, while they were powerful for like the last 20 years, was good for baseball bottom line for a while. He actually says but it did create this more parochial nature of baseball, because unlike the NBA and the NFL, which is really a national first approach, so you will watch games of teams you don't care about much quicker because it's a national thing. You understand the national storylines, you understand matchups. And he says that one thing that baseball might do to actually push this forward from a more substantial level than just like pitch counts or whatever, is that the death of the RSNs, and we've talked about this before, Major League Baseball will probably step in and start making this subscriber. They'll probably start to centralize this more and push to a more national broadcasting models. And then that should make the league less parochial, right? Oh, as soon as the Nationals are out, I'm not watching anymore, right? Like that's a big part of baseball's problem. So it might have made some of these regions real strong. But if these regional sports networks are dying, and they are, if you have an Amazon or some of these others, or even Major League Baseball, even just giving it, the product, itself through subscriptions, et cetera, that this kind of World Series can help to propel them into a more national broadcasting model, which will draw more general interest than just I follow my team, which the regional ones kind of forced.
Well, by its very nature, I mean, like you and I are never going to learn about the Seattle Mariners to any great extent, because I mean I'm making a team up, but Seattle is broadcast locally through some means in Seattle, and there's not a good way short of subscribing to MLB Plus, and even then, because it's always historically and so regional. I think it does kind of limit the possibilities for Major League Baseball. They do definitely need more national broadcast. They need to have, like baseball or basketball has had that. In what is the show on TNT, the NBA Tonight or whatever it is?
NBA Tonight, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Charles Barkley and family.
Yeah, they've had that on regular weekly broadcasts on TNT, regular weekly broadcasts on ESPN for years and years and years. And baseball does that Sunday Night Baseball thing, but they need some national broadcast during the week. And they need a contract with, pick your NBC or whatever, to broadcast games on Saturday or Sunday in the football off season.
Even hockey with their ESPN Plus deal, and then the redistribution through Disney and Hulu then has more. I mean, you literally cannot watch in the Washington D.C. market a Capitals Rangers games because they're all licensed to ESPN Plus. There's no local broadcast of either for those two markets because they're all claimed by the national holder. So it feels like this might, the death of the RSNs and the sort of like, kind of these things are all cyclical to some degree, but the kind of like, baseball's popularity on the rise may give them another perfect storm to really propel the sport.
Well, and you raise a good point, which is broadcast rights. The NFL holds all the broadcast rights for all of its teams. Like I did some marketing deals for an NFL team, and we always had to say in these agreements, we don't hold any we don't hold any TV broadcast rights. Whereas in Major League Baseball, there's very little national broadcast rights. The teams hold their own local broadcast rights, and I get it, but at the same time, I think baseball would be best served doing what Major League Baseball and the National Hockey League did, which is to get their product out in front of a national audience. Pick your times. Pick a day during, like May, June, July, August. Have a baseball night thing that's not just Sunday night baseball. Play Sunday afternoon games. People would love to have sports to watch on Sunday afternoon when the NFL is not in season. I don't know why basketball hasn't done that. Some sport needs to take advantage of the downtime, between February and September. And half of that is perfect baseball time.
Yeah. So I think, baseball, if they can, and I think they're, Rob Manfred, right? Isn't that the commissioner of baseball? I think he's actually done a pretty good job steering baseball. So I think that if they can, I think if they've got some road ahead of them here to continue to grow the sport,
because they've had some bad,
is dead.
Yeah. Well, they've had some bad commissioners too.
Yeah. Right.
They've had, and I think we've talked, a little bit about them over the years. But Manfred seems to have done a pretty good job. But I just to emphasize, so, I mean, again, this is the high watermark. Okay. The trick is, can baseball take advantage of it? Not to say they're going to maintain 15 million viewers watching games or even World Series games, but can they raise the bar, the normal everyday ratings and interest bar as a result of this? And it can't just be Yankees, Dodgers. It has to be other teams that make an impact to get, kind of fans around the country going. Much as I'd like to see the Dodgers win every year.
And, the truth is, just the economics of baseball pretty much guarantees you're going to get a marquee team. Now, I'm expanding my definition of marquee teams past L.A. and New York. You include Boston, Chicago, but you're going to get, the chances are from the economics of baseball that you're going to get those kind of teams in the, more than you're going to get the Diamondbacks, Texans, just because they can,
of course,
they're allowed to spend more.
The Dallas Cowboys are on a ton more national broadcasts for the NFL than almost any other team, even on off years. It doesn't matter because they just have a very national presence, and certainly baseball needs to take advantage of that. But what I'm saying is, even the small, they need to make even the kind of lesser market teams part of a more national presence. That would really help them, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
Part of the problem is there's too many games. To me, I don't mean it like that. That came out wrong. There's, because I like baseball, but there's too many games to make it special. Part of the reason why the NFL is special is that they there's not, there's 17 games a year for every team. And I've sometimes said on this show before, I think sometimes the NFL is expanding too rapidly. If you have, what's special about the NFL, it used to be in the old days, they owned Sunday. And everybody sat and watched NBC and CBS and then later Fox. But even the NFL, if they're going to play on Thursday, Monday, Saturday during the, when college ends, Sunday, it's a lot of football. It's not as special. It's kind of like eating ice cream. If you eat ice cream every single day for every single meal, it kind of loses the special nature of it as a treat, right? So if you play too much football, it's the same. And baseball, there's so many games, that the meaning behind the games are much less consequential than in other sports.
Even hockey and NBA, which have a ton of games, is still
it's half as many though. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so like on a game in, game out basis, it's just the stakes are fairly low for your average baseball game in July.
But that doesn't mean they can't still raise the interest somewhat and use this as a stepping stone to do it.
Yeah.
But they need better media agreements.
Yeah. And I think they'll get them, and they're kind of forced to find them now. So there's a yay baseball. Even though I'm not necessarily, although they did get me back with this playoff, so I'm probably another good demonstration of the metric. But everything's better when baseball is in a healthier position. And 6 or 7 years ago, they were, it was is baseball ever going to be relevant again? Stories.
Baseball was calling themselves America's sport, but nobody else was.
Right. So good job, baseball.
And Dodgers.
Yes, and Dodgers.
Thank you.
They're a likable team. I actually think.
They're not obnoxious about, it's again, they used to really home grow stuff, their players, but now they've bought a lot of them and that turns some fans off, but they're still fairly humble about it. Yeah, as by big market, big money teams go, they're fairly humble about
it. Yeah, hate the game, not the player, or whatever that cliche is on that one.
Some players are easy to hate, but I mean, the Dodgers don't have any.
No, I'm saying it just in general, like just because the Dodgers they play by the rules that they're given. Like,
yeah,
sorry,
that's right.
I find that argument, that dog don't hunt with me. Now we kind of go to a totally different kind of interesting story. One that I actually found super fascinating is, you probably heard that, I think they're called the Dome, this company Cosm, COSM, just got exclusive rights for the NFL to start putting NFL games into their dome. Now, what this is quickly is an immersive experience. It's in a dome. Basically, it's a planet. It's the love child of a planetarium, an IMAX movie theater, and VR goggles. But you don't wear anything on your eyes. It's basically you sit in this dome and 360 full surround immersive video and audio, but then it's also a bar, a restaurant. They serve you drinks, whatever. It's like a full entertainment experience. And they just got the NFL. Now, at first I was like, oh, who are these folks, right? I'd heard of the Dome as a concept before. And of course, the globe in Las Vegas is not the same thing.
It's the sphere, but yeah.
Sphere, yeah, that's right. Is somewhat similar, right? So this kind of thing is growing in the consciousness. But I was shocked to learn when I went to their website, they've got contracts with college football, NHL, plus with the Stanley Cup, NBA, UFC, pretty much major all the different soccer leagues. They pretty much, if you were to tick through a bunch of major sports that they don't have after adding the NFL, it's actually only Major League Baseball. It looks like, if I'm just looking at their logos. And this is going to be what they're trying to do, is basically expand the live game experience through as much digital enhancement as they can do. And there's now only one of these in Los Angeles and one of these in Dallas, but I can only imagine that there's ones being planned in major markets around the country, if not the world. And it looks like a pretty awesome way to experience any event, concert, movie, science footage, and sports.
Yeah, well, fast forward 20 years from now, and this is going to be in your house.
Yeah,
right. But for right now, yeah, I think this looks really neat. Obviously, this kind of immersion theory of entertainment has become more popular. I think the Sphere has been, home run by anybody's standards. In terms of the interest it's garnered, the reviews, are great. I mean, the Eagles was the first band in there, and they got, or U2 rather, sorry, and they got like rave reviews about it. And so I think this seems to be kind of along the lines of this. It's not cheap, okay? It's not cheap at all. There's pricing in here. I think it said it's up to $120 if I recall. Here, by the way, sorry. CNBC has a story on this called Immersive Entertainment Company Cosm lands rights to broadcast NFL games by Jessica Golden, dated October 28th. So that's a story. Yeah, and look, again, it's not cheap. This is like a first world problem thing. So it says the domes fit about 700 people with an average ticket price ranging between $22 and $127. Cosm uses a dynamic pricing model similar to concerts, live sports. So in other words, if some boring soccer game is in there in Dallas that nobody's going to be at, you can get a $22 ticket. But if it's the Cowboys and the Steelers, you're paying $127. That's what dynamic pricing, and incidentally, that's kind of the model for all entertainment ticketing nowadays. It's much more of an immersive price. I mean, the price will even go up and down on concerts depending on interest, where that didn't used to do that. I think this is great. Obviously, it says this company is founded by somebody called Mirasol Capital, which I had never heard of before. Jeb Terry, I guess, is the president. Um, they are clearly going to expand this.
Yeah.
LA and New York, there's no doubt there's going to be one in the or LA and Dallas, there's going to be one in the New York market, Chicago, Miami, you have to assume. But once it really kind of gets, going, it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, now there's a lot of overhead, right? Because this is probably an expensive
Why it costs
building.
$127 for big games.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to build these, right? It's an infrastructure. It's infrastructure reliant. But it and also this is the kind of thing where you're not just waiting for the NFL game, right? They have all these major sports things, but then they do. I've seen concerts. I've seen things like footage from the Mars rover. You go or like volcano. So some random Wednesday, that's probably more your $25 ticket. But if you and the family or you and your friend or you and a date want to go like travel inside a volcano in an immersive experience, that's not a bad way to spend an evening, for $25. So they're gonna have programming every single night at these places.
If you want to go watch the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
So the column here says, you kind of touched on some of this, but it says that Cosm already has deals in place with the NBA, UFC, ESPN, NBC Sports, TNT Sports, Fox Sports, Amazon Prime Video, and broadcasts everything from the Summer Olympics in Paris to the current World Series. Now, I just point out that Amazon Prime Video could be all kinds of stuff. Every movie, every TV show, not just sports. So you could theoretically have an Amazon produced movie, throw it on broadcast availability on this, and have the most amazing broadcast experience aside of what's the big movie theater with the huge screens?
IMAX.
IMAX. Yeah, right. So I think this is the future. This is, again, I was not really kidding about having this in your house someday. Not now, but 20, 30 years from now, average homes will have a broadcast room that can do stuff like this. I'm convinced of it.
The technology is actually not that crazy, because, it's basically just next generation planetarium software, which is like doing things immersed. So it's not, I think you're exactly right. Getting this into a home kit would not be, pop-up tent in the backyard that creates the dome, and then it's basically just like a cube projector, and you probably just download content. So I think you might even be off by 10 years, because I don't think it's that heavy a lift from a technological perspective. So I went in, and I would encourage you, if anyone's out there is interested, there's great YouTube videos. You can kind of see demos and some stuff. You can kind of get a sense of it. I mean, not the same, but you can kind of get a little bit of a feel for it. And I was watching an interview. I think it must have been a marketing guy or whatever for the company. And oh crap, I just lost my point. What did he say? Anyway, it went right out. It went right out from my brain.
You talking about the guy that cited in the column here?
No, it was a video interview that I was watching, and I can't remember what it was. It was such a good point, Steve. It was such a good point.
It would have been good. It'll come back to you after
it will when we're talking about something completely different. But I do think this is where that's what it was. I knew if I just paused. So he was saying, you're also not getting just Fox's feed or NBC's feed of an NBA game. They have special. This is actually probably where more of the investment is on Cosm's part, is in the shooting of it. So because they need special cameras, special angles, to be able to broadcast in the dome, you can't just run. You're not just running the feed from, So the production side of it is probably pretty expensive, and that they basically have special cameras, special camera crews. So now, when one of these games is going to be in a dome for the NFL, they'll, kind of like NFL films, right? Or, there'll be a third company out there shooting the game with a completely different set of cameras and production techniques.
Yeah. Cosm, by the way, that's the worst name ever, just for the record. I mean, do better. But anyway, they've raised more than $250 million in capital. The company's valued at $1 billion. They've got as investors the Milwaukee Bucks owner, Mark Lazary, Cleveland Cavaliers owner, Dan Gilbert, co-managing partner of the Philadelphia 76ers and New Jersey Devils, David Blitzer, who is Josh Harris's partner with those organizations, not in Washington, not with the Washington football team. So it's this is not a small thing, and as you said, it says they've broadcast other stuff in here, not just sports related stuff. So imagine like you could film, like Amazon could do a video, could do a movie that's intentionally designed and filmed to be an immersive experience and broadcast in a place like this, and would completely and radically change your movie experience. There's so much you could do with this. It's very exciting. It's a shame it's only LA and Dallas right now, because that needs to be. I'd love to see it. I really would.
You're closer than me. Yeah, I would too. And I imagine now none of my internet sleuthing nor this article say like next market is. I didn't see anything like that.
You have to think New York, Miami, Chicago, right?
Yeah, I would say that? Probably. Although you could make a business case that if you go to places where people don't have as easy access to these things, might actually be a smart business.
Well, yeah, granted, but you also have to have a big enough market that enough people are going to spend $100 to watch a football game.
Yeah, fair. So I would, pay attention to this. I think now I'll be honest, Steve, when you first sent me the link, I was like, oh, this is just another, like, I'm going to get a bunch of gambling data. Like
I send Chris a lot of gambling stories we don't do, because the way the link behind the curtain is I just pick out headlines and I look at them when we read them later, basically. So if the headline looks interesting, I'll throw it out there and we'll decide. And so I throw Chris a lot of gambling headlines. We never do any of them.
Yeah, at least not the small ones. But that's what I thought this was. Oh, here's another thing where I'm going to get like streaming data overlaid on the TV. Right. Nope. So I was like, so maybe that was part of my pleasant surprise when I was like, oh, no, this is something completely different.
It sounds super cool. I got to admit, I have a general rule that I'm not going to spend more than a couple $100 for any 2 or 3 hour form of entertainment. I'm cheap, financially cheap. I'm just not going to do it. But like this $100 for a good football game, I would do it. I wouldn't do it every week. But I think it would be really neat to like go see the Super Bowl, an important game, something this would be a lot of fun.
And so the building, there's obviously the dome, but that's only about half the footprint of these buildings. The other half of the footprint is the sports bar on steroids. They have giant walls of TV, bar, probably sports books coming, I would probably assume.
Oh yeah, of course.
So it's actually, you can, if you just wanted to, go, and with all those broadcasting rights, and they can show you all 10 opening round March Madness games or whatever, and you can sit in the bar and watch it on giant screens, and then go in for the 10 o'clock game that you have a ticket for in the dome. So they're also programming around the dome as well.
Which is a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
But you're talking about, you've got to have space to do this. This is not like
it's a city block type deal.
No, this is not like you buy a half an acre thing on the corner and do this. This is also partly why they need to have it in a big, large place, because the cost of development of something like this, just the land alone, and then the construction and operation, it's really, really high. So you can't limit your market to like, the St. Louis suburbs or whatever. No. It's got to be. I mean, again, maybe someday when the costs come down, okay. But right now, we're just talking major markets, I think.
And if they don't succeed, it'll be because the overhead costs on two levels: one, the building of the infrastructure and opening new venues, and two, the cost of getting the production level of these events that they need to fit the dome. Those are two chunky overheads, and if they can't find their margins, that's why this will die. But I think it's going to work.
Well, it's the same problem with the Sphere.
Yeah.
The Sphere is hugely expensive. The Sphere is a place that, again, it goes over I'm willing to spend a couple $100 on 2 hours of entertainment thing. The Sphere is really, really, really expensive. And so it's got to be, Vegas is a perfect place to have something like that, because there's people there who are on vacation and they're kind of throwing around money, and that's a perfect place for it. But the Sphere would not work, again, in the St. Louis suburbs. Just would not right now, at least. And I think someday this technology will scale down and become um, more accessible to more people. In the same way, like if you go back 20 years ago in movie theaters, screens are small, sound was okay, but not great. Movie theaters like 5 or 6 years ago, all the major chains dramatically upgraded their screens, their sound system, their broadcast
seats.
quality, their seats, and now that's standard. And so this Cosm technology in the Sphere are on the forefront of technology, and I think you have to take a big picture view of this and see what is going to happen, what it's going to look like a decade from now. And because you're right, maybe 20 years probably too long.
Yeah,
I said
well, I
20
can't wait
years
to
before.
go.
Yeah,
So
I
if I
can't wait
find
to
myself
go.
in L.A. or if they open one in New York or whatever,
Well, hey, call if you're on your travels, call me. I'll go and I can make a quick jaunt to Dallas and we'll go watch the team.
yeah, that would be fun. Hopefully not the Cowboys. So we always like to check into valuations from a variety of vantage points. And what was it? Was it Forbes doing it? Was this the Forbes list? Yeah. So they're kind of a bit of the gold standard on this one. They kind of were in on the valuations game before most. And
I'm sorry. Wait, no, this was Bleacher Report.
Aren't they reporting on the Forbes?
Let me see here. Let me
study?
see. Sportico. We're about to get in the NHL. Sportico is that, but Forbes is no, Forbes was the rating story. So now we are talking. Yeah, and then go ahead.
Who cares? People.
It sounded good when you said it, but
I know. Reputable folks have put out valuations in the NHL.
Okay, so
and
Forbes
the
is the NBA is Forbes.
Okay, there we go. So, and these are none of these are things I think are that shocking on multiple levels, but it is kind of good to see where these things are at. And we've talked about that the NBA has competed with the NFL, strangely enough, for some of the valuations for these teams, and this list starts to prove that a little bit, at least for the NBA.
Okay, so we'll start with the NBA then. This is Bleacher Report reporting on Forbes here. You want to find the Bleacher Report column. It's called Warriors, Knicks, Lakers, Celtics tops Forbes 2024 list of most valuable NBA teams by Scott Polacek, I guess, October 24th. So they've got number one is the Golden State Warriors, 8.8 billion. The Knicks, 7.5 billion. The Lakers, third, 7.1. Boston at 6. LA Clippers at 5.5. Chicago Bulls at 5. Houston Rockets, 4.9. Brooklyn Nets, 4.8. Dallas Mavericks, 4.7. Philadelphia 76ers, 4.6. Now, I'd like to point out that the Washington NFL team, sold for $6 billion, and so that would put them at fourth on this list.
You could probably make a case a little less.
You definitely could, because that included the stadium. And most NFL, I think there's very, very few, if any, NBA teams own their local arenas because they're always local sports authorities and stuff. So yeah, if you take the stadium out of it, you're looking at like 5 at most, maybe less. So that puts, either way you look at it, that puts Washington kind of in the middle of the top for the NBA. And it would put like the Dallas Cowboys the most valuable franchise. Would we decide it, maybe close to 10, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably that's where I think the conversation would begin.
Am I the only one that's totally shocked at some of these valuations for the NBA teams?
I mean, I've been shocked for a while. So, I mean, these sort of confirm my shocked.
Yeah, I don't get it, to be honest. Their ratings don't justify this. Their attendance doesn't justify this. They're playing in basketball arenas. Even if they're selling out, there's still, between 15 and 20,000 people at most. It's not the same as, of course they have 82 games. I get it. But their media contracts aren't as big. I don't know really where this is coming from. I mean, tell me why I'm just not thinking clearly about this.
I think probably one is how global the NBA is. It's arguably the most global of the 4 U.S. major sports. And I think if you take it out of the U.S. context, it's probably not neck and neck, but it's challenging soccer. Or at least in the kind of conversation.
Okay.
So I think, I just think that is probably one of the factors that's driving this up. Is
it is a lot more global than the NFL. The NFL wants to be global. Their NBA is a pretend global sport, whereas the
NFL is a pretend. Yeah,
sorry, the NFL is a pretend global sport, whereas basketball actually is a global sport. They're fanatics in China. China is a bigger market. I think. I want to say, don't hold me to this. I want to say the NBA may even have more income from China than the United States in terms of broadcasts. I will look that up. I think that's true, but I'm not sure. It's at a minimum, it's competitive.
And you've got international superstars in the NBA. You've got a whole global ecosystem of professional leagues.
There's been NBA players that have marketed themselves in China, like Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, regularly market himself in China for every single offseason he went there, and other players do the same thing.
So I would say that probably that factor makes up some of the gap in where you're like, what? These are high valuations. So I think that probably is a driving factor. And I think, other than that, I don't really have great explanations about this, other than there's a cultural cachet too, but I don't know how much billions that translates into. And the other secret sauce I'd say, other than international, is it's the sport out of any of the major sports. Again, only soccer you would say something similar to, where you have such marketable stars, mostly because they wear no gear on their face. Even baseball with the caps and the helmets and whatnot, so I just think also the players are so much more marketable, are so much more superstars. They have so much more face recognition. And so I think those are the factors that kind of add that bump.
Yes. And I think that has always mattered. And the other thing is that the camera angles on television are a lot more close up for a lot more a period of time. So not only are they not wearing giant helmets, but you're also getting a close-up look at the players, whereas the NFL, by the very nature of the game, has to kind of expand the view. And so even on your screen, sometimes they're tiny little dots, basically. And so I think that matters. So yes, NBA players are more recognizable. That's for sure. Now, I'm just Googling as Chris is talking. And so the first hit I found was from something called www.lemonade.fr. And I don't even know if that is even a legitimate website, but it says China is the second largest market after the United States. It sells TV broadcast rights, branded merchandise, and partnerships there. The economic states have thus far have been vital to the NBA. It's estimated to have made a record 500 million in sales in 2019. So that's 5 years ago. 500 million is a drop in the bucket for the NBA. So I have to think it's bigger. But if that's anywhere in the ballpark, I think America is still the more important market for them, but it's probably much closer than we think now.
Yeah, and I just think it means it helps to drive these valuations up. Now, the NHL, obviously much less. But I actually was pleasantly surprised, actually, when I saw these. And, again, I think what the top was Toronto, New York, Montreal, Boston, so, places, Canadian one, Toronto, biggest media market in Canada. Canada is obviously hockey crazy, so that makes a ton of sense. A lot of the original six type markets. But, there was valuations up there starting to kiss 4 billion, kind of in that range for those the top markets. But then you go to the bottom, which, I'm a big hockey guy, although I would give you that it's more of a parochial sport, but the Arizona Coyotes are now the Utah Hockey Club. And even that move actually produced a pretty sizable jump in their valuation. But nothing shocking here. The only thing shocking to me as a Washington Capitals guy was that the Caps are actually the 9th most valued franchise, and above Detroit, which shocked me.
Yeah, I don't totally understand that. We're reading Bleacher Report, Maple Leafs, Rangers, Canadiens, top Sportico's 2024 NHL franchise valuation rankings by Mike Chiari. So this is Bleacher Report citing Sportico. Number one, Toronto Maple Leafs, 3.66 billion. The New York Rangers, second, 3.25 billion. The Canadiens, 2.93 million. Boston Bruins, 2.67. LA Kings, they have a typo in this column, 2.5 billion. The Blackhawks, 2.4. It goes down from there. The Capitals were ninth, as Chris said, at 1.86 billion, and the Red Wings 10th at 1.85 billion. Obviously substantially less, but these are larger numbers than I thought. I would never have guessed I'm not a hockey fan particularly. I'll watch it occasionally. If I had to guess, the most valuable team, it definitely wouldn't have been Toronto. I might have said the Rangers. I might have said the Canadiens or the Bruins. Toronto, I mean, maybe I'm missing something because I just don't follow it on a regular basis, but that strikes me as very odd.
I think it's less. I mean, because they've actually been. I think they just won their first playoff series in like 15 years recently, even though they've been good. That's not a good combination ultimately. I think it has way more to do with the fact with just the popularity. I mean, it is their NFL, in Canada. And Toronto is the biggest media market in the country. So I think if you just look at those fundamentals is the reason. It actually has very little to do with, their performance on the ice. In fact, if you look at the top 10 valuations, there's some Stanley Cups, but you kind of have to go back in a 20-year window. And it's not like any of these teams are massively dominant.
No.
So this is not like, some, championship run that's driving any of these valuations.
Part of it is just inflation.
Yes.
Natural inflation. Yeah. Although, I mean, if you go back in the history of the NHL in the United States over the past 20 years, it was maybe 15 years ago, where the only place you could find them on TV was this subsidiary of, I think, NBC Universal. It was like the Outdoor Channel.
Yeah. That was after their strike. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it was basically dead in terms of TV broadcasts in America. And they have grown and it has gotten better. And now they have major media contracts on ESPN. And the Stanley Cup is broadcast on major networks. So it has grown and has gotten more popular. And so in that respect, the valuation should go up. Just for context sake, so if the Toronto Maple Leafs are ranked number one at 3.66 million, the Washington football team, because I don't use the term the C words, it's at 6 billion with the stadium. And so they're saying the Maple Leafs at number one are like, what is that? 60% of like the number 8 or 9th ranked NFL team. That's kind of the context of it. And so that's I think that's about probably right as compared just in terms of like a thumbnail, amateur view of valuations. That seems about right to me.
Yeah, no, I think it was on the positive side of normal in a way, I was like, wow, these are a little higher than I would have expected, but also kind of in a make sense way.
Of course, it also doesn't go into what is the valuation of like the 20th or the 30th ranked NHL team, which is obviously substantially less.
Right. And the Arizona,
you and I couldn't
now
even name.
Utah shows you the basement. Yeah. Remember we did a story a couple of years ago. They were playing in like a 5,000 seat arena or whatever.
Oh yeah, Arizona. That's right. Yeah, I mean, because like you and I couldn't even name the bottom in NHL teams probably, whereas we could name all 32 NFL teams pretty easily and NBA teams.
I could probably name them, although the Utah thing tripped me up.
Yeah.
I was like, oh wow, I missed that. But the bottom line is owning a professional sports team is a good investment if you can hack it. And by the way, we'd be remiss to say that since we talked about private equity being allowed in the ownership bouquet of an NFL team, I think we've had 3 stories in we could report on new private equity moving in or looking to move into NFL team ownership. So man, not shocking at this point, but it is becoming a weekly headline that some new private equity group is looking to or has joined the ownership group.
Yeah, this time it's the Buffalo Bills. SI Sports Illustrated has this report. Arctos Partners talks to purchase minority stake in the Bills by Kyle Silagavi, I guess. Silagai. I butchered his name. October 30th, 2024. So we've talked about this before, as Chris said. This is Arctos Partners. They advertise themselves as a private investment firm focused on creating valuable solutions to complex problems, which is a bunch of crap, basically. In terms, the bottom line is they are private equity, and so by the way, so they have what is interesting is they've got investments in all kinds of teams. It says that they're either directly or indirectly invested in the Boston Red Sox, the Golden State Warriors, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and a bunch of soccer teams I've never heard of. The Paris Saint-Germain FC, Liverpool, which I've heard of, and as well as the Aston Martin Formula One team. So this sounds like their focus, this Arctos Partners, is focused on sports investment, which is a trend we've seen. We talked about this a couple weeks ago of how in NFL ownership used to be like the toy for the uber rich who made their money in some other way. Whereas now you've got the Josh Harrises of the world and the Arctos Partners of the world are making sports their business. And I think more than just like the Bills have a minority partner, that's the takeaway here is we're seeing professional sports investment more and more in American national sports.
And reminder, the Bills just the municipality, the Bills, they're about to go on a new stadium build, right? And so, I'm sure there's all kinds of, needs to raise capital here. So, and in some ways, we can say a lot of negative things about private equity in sports, but in some ways, they may help, especially in the NFL's model, may help some of these teams still stay and thrive in these smaller markets.
Well, it's not a bad idea for them you don't be mad if your team has access to more capital.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, does it really matter to the fans look, the fans shouldn't really care who owns a team as long as, the owner isn't, cavorting with hookers on a boat. Hi, Dan Snyder. As long as they're professionals, who cares from a fan's perspective who owns a team?
Well, the danger is when it becomes predatory, right? And that's where the league's got to regulate.
I agree. But what I'm saying is within reason. If you're a Bills fan and the Bills owner, what's his name? Pagula?
Pagula, yeah. He's got the daughter that just lost the U.S. Open a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right. If he wants to bring in a minority partner and he can raise some cash, okay, good for him. I have no problem with it at all. I mean, like you said, they know what the NFL wants to eliminate is having owners that are openly care more about making money than they are winning games, at least giving the perception of it. Because I think sometimes perception is more than reality, maybe for that. But they want the perception that these are family businesses and we are here to win. And you bring in too much private equity, it becomes just another investment, and it's just a number and not a sport anymore. And so I think that's the thing I was trying to avoid. But who cares? But for minority partners, you're good for them.
No, if you're a Bills fan, I mean, remember they were flirting with moving to Toronto. They were playing 4 games in Toronto just about 10 years ago.
This is going to save them.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's just interesting because it's like every week we get a different story on this.
I think that maybe you and I need to form a PI company. We can go, I'll kick in $1,000. You can kick in $1,000. We'll see how well we do.
Be curious to see what the Packers do over time. Yeah. One last story here today, Steve, and that is apparently Barry Sanders. I was going to mix up my two words here. Barry Sanders has gotten quite litigious recently.
Well, he's the victim of someone who is litigious, more accurately stated. Barry Sanders getting sued. That's what we're trying to say. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail with this, but a guy named Alan Key has sued Barry Sanders and Barry Sanders Company, which is called Barry Sanders Inc. This is over a photograph. Now, the photograph is the iconic photo of Barry Sanders that we all have seen and we all recognize. It's almost the only image you will ever see of Barry Sanders, the most recognizable image of Barry Sanders that you've ever seen. This is filed in New York federal court in New York City. And the issue here is this guy, Alan Key, took this photograph, again, the iconic image of Barry Sanders. Sanders and his company licensed it from something called NFL Photos, which is a subsidiary of the NFL, to use on a book Barry Sanders wrote, on the cover of a book. But then Sanders allegedly used this same photo in all kinds of products he's marketed, website, merchandise, all this stuff. And Alan Key's point is that he didn't have the rights to use his photo because Alan Key had actually gone through the effort of copywriting this photo through the United States Copyright Office. So he's alleging a bunch of different copyright violations here, and claiming that the only rights Barry had was to use the rights to use it on a book. And even then, he's disputing that this NFL Photos outfit even had the rights to do it. There is a companion lawsuit here in which Key has also sued a bunch of other companies, not just Barry Sanders. It is, no, I can't find it, of course, in here. It's like Fanatics and a bunch of sporting goods outlets for selling a bunch of stuff too. So it's bigger than just Barry Sanders here. So that's kind of the gist of it. This lawsuit is there's not a lot to say because it's just been filed and absolutely nothing has happened here. Here it is. So he's filed another lawsuit against Fanatics, Dick's Sporting Goods, the Highland Mint, I've never heard of the Highland Mint, Timeless Creations, VC Collectibles. So he's got multiple out there. It sounds like if the fact pattern is accurate here, that he probably has a point against Barry Sanders. So if this is remotely true, I think you could probably expect a settlement probably with Sanders. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, I understand I don't understand necessarily all the legal mumbo jumbo, but I do, understand it at a headline level. But it is kind of hysterical that the guy's getting sued for his own image. I mean, if you just boil it down to that.
O.J. Simpson went to jail for stealing stuff that had been stolen from him, remember?
That's right. That's right.
No, he used a gun to steal it back. That's a problem,
right.
But
this is a little bit more violent than a copy paste.
Exactly. But it is funny. But look, I mean, the players don't own they to play in an NFL game, they have released their names and likeness. They don't own their names and their likenesses for purposes of images. The NFL owns all those images. The NFL allows the photographers to come in and take these photos. And so the more interesting one that I haven't really gotten into yet, because I just pulled this like 30 minutes before with the showtime. He's alleging again that NFL in this petition, NFL Photos doesn't necessarily hold the rights to license it to Sanders for his book. So that to me is a more interesting one than just Sanders. Sounds like he's probably in the wrong here. He got a license. He's dumb. He put it, for a book, he put it everywhere. That's not that interesting. The more interesting one is, why does this guy think that NFL Photos doesn't have the rights to it? That one we'll have to look into more.
Well, there you go. I hope Barry, I hope he doesn't get lose too
Barry's
much
going to
money.
have to cough up some money. But Barry probably doesn't have a ton of money that the players from today have, even though he's.
I was going to say, and he cut his career short, so he probably cut 4 to 5 years of earning off his own career.
His career didn't get cut short. He voluntarily cut it.
Yeah, he cut it.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, he probably clipped his own earning potential by about 5 years.
And he's kind of a quiet guy, and he's never been in a ton of media. He's not had big, high-profile jobs. This may be his best source of income, is like signing autographs and selling merchandise on a website and stuff. They've attached some exhibits to this petition, and it's screenshots of his website with the image on it and everything. So he's making, that's a source of income for him.
If Detroit makes the Super Bowl this year, which is,
possible,
decent chance.
Amazingly enough,
run Barry and put Barry and Calvin Johnson in uniform and go let them run one play.
Just because that would be great to see.
But two guys that said, I just can't handle the Detroit Lions anymore, and cut their own careers off.
That is basically why both of them left.
Yes,
in summary form.
Out of their own mouths. Yeah.
Yeah. If there was a team that was a bigger train wreck than Washington, it was the Cleveland Browns and the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. Oh, how great is it not to be in those conversations anymore? I love laughing at those franchises. Speaking of that, Steve, it's got to be a more festive atmosphere on the Hogstye this season.
It's certainly a lot easier to do the shows, that's for sure. We do the Hogside podcast, which is released every Thursday, and during the season we're reviewing the prior Washington games, which has been 6 wins, unbelievably, and previewing the next games, going all over all of the regular Washington news and so forth. And we have all of our regular written content all on the hogside.com.
I got to tell you, the local New York media, and I mean, I guess I see versions of where they're right. Man, they think it. I never for what are they 2-6 the New York Giants right now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
man, the local media thinks that it's almost a gimme this week for them.
Do they really?
Yeah, it's the strangest
thing. Why would
they
think that?
Well, they think that because New York is such a baseball town, and you had the Mets and the Yankees go this deep in the playoffs that most of the sports, local punditries had their head up baseball's butt for weeks. So they
just think it's normal Washington. They don't even realize.
Exactly. Right. They're not really paying attention to football yet. And now they're waking up from their baseball, postseason hangovers to 2 horrible teams. And they're trying to justify having to talk about them for the next 3 months.
Because the Giants are a really bad team.
Yeah, they're not good. Now we could look really stupid here in a couple of days. So there you go. But
the people listening will know.
Yes,
already
they'll already be laughing at us.
Yeah,
but I was just like, wow, I was like, that's a lot of confidence here in the local New York media. Interesting.
Well, the line, when the last I checked the line for our game preview, it was only 3.5. It was Washington minus 3.5, which is for a road game they're thinking like 5 to 7 points on a neutral field. It's not that much.
Yeah, I think it's gotten to 4, but same thing.
Has it? Okay, yeah.
Same point. All right, Steve. Well, we will see all of you in 2 weeks.